Welcome to your go-to Detroit Pistons podcast, The Pistons Pulse, co-hosted by me, Bryce Simon of Motor City Hoops.
And Omari Sanko for the second, Pistons beat writer for the Detroit Free Press.
And of course, we're always blessed to be joined by our producer, Wes Davenport. If you are not listening to Wes and Blake Silverman over on the Pin Down on the Detroit Bad Boys YouTube channel, you absolutely should be. Make sure you are listening to and taking in all of the great Pistons content creation out there. Locked on Pistons, Order of the Blazing Horse, all of the ones that I'm forgetting, Pistons Talk, so many great content creators out there. Make sure you are taking in all of it, right? There's plenty to go around right now. I know Pistons fans are looking for Pistons content, and we know we have a lot of great content creators out there. With that said, make sure you are definitely subscribed to the Detroit Free Press, reading all of O2's work, and subscribe for free to the Motor City Hoops Substack, reading all of my game notes and analysis. And listen, when the time comes for the offseason, which is hopefully a while, I will have all of that stuff as well. So, all right, O2, you ask people to come to vent. And right now, hopefully the comments are working. We don't have any comments yet. So I don't know if people didn't come to vent or if the comments are broke down. If they are broke down, I thoroughly apologize. That was not like on purpose or anything like that. I know we have people here with us live, but I'm a little nervous. Anyway, you asked people to come to vent because Detroit is down 3-1 in this series. They are headed back to Detroit for the game on Wednesday night. Sounds like Franz Wagner, maybe game time decision or something like that. But O2, where do things stand? Like let's go. Lots of times we start this podcast with the mile high view. What is the 5,280 foot view of this situation right now?
The mile high view is that this absolutely is not where they want to be. Going into game 5 in front of your home crowd, down 3-1, fighting for your playoff life. Only one of a handful of teams to be number 1 and trail a number 8 seed. And, you could talk about Orlando having injuries throughout the season and they're not a true 8 seed. And you could talk about the issues the Pistons had and maybe they are not the typical 1 seed, this or that. However you want to spin it, they came into this series and everybody pretty universally thought that they would win this. If not in 5, then in 6. And some people had them in 7 because they've had just been the better team than Orlando all season. And if you watch both these teams for the first time in this playoff series, it just hasn't looked that way at all. Orlando's been the more consistent team. They've been the team that has had extra efforts. It just seems like they've been hungrier, like lean on whatever sports cliche. They wanted more, however you want to put it. The Pistons have not met the moment. So that's the mile high view. They came into the postseason with bigger expectations, but yeah, they're fighting for their playoff life in game 5. And that's not what they expected coming into this.
So I just want to talk about a few things here for the Pistons, and then we can talk about this game and the series as a whole. One thing we are not going to do, guys, one thing that we said that we didn't want to get into on this episode that we are going to try to keep to 30 minutes is we're not going to talk offseason. We're not going to get into the offseason stuff. I mean, quite frankly, that could be a conversation in a couple days. So we're going to try to keep it just on this for now. And I know the offseason is going to be huge if and when the time comes, but that's not right now. Omari, I think you probably get this correct. You want to guess who the worst 3-point shooting team in the NBA is in the playoffs right now based on percentage?
If it's not Orlando, it's the Pistons.
It is absolutely the Pistons at 27.5%. Now, Orlando's 4th worst, but it's not even like their 2nd worst. And Denver is 2nd worst at 30%, 30.1. So there's a little bit of a gap, 2.5% gap, right? Detroit has only made 8 threes per game so far in the playoffs. You want to guess where Detroit is at in free throw percentage? And this does directly tie into the game on Monday night.
I wouldn't think they're at the bottom, maybe in the bottom half, if I had to guess.
3rd worst. They are 3rd worst in free throw percentage. Cleveland's last, Toronto 2nd to last. Detroit is just barely above Toronto at 72.8%. So let's do one more. You want to guess? Because this applies to last night as well, where Detroit is in turnovers per game in the playoffs.
Yeah, I would guess number 1.
They are actually not number 1. The team that is number 1 is absolutely insane. I will quickly read off their numbers in a second, but they are 2nd from the bottom with 18.3. The Los Angeles Lakers are 1st in turnovers. Now, here's what's funny, just real quick. The Lakers are number 1 in field goal percentage and number 2 in 3-point percentage. And Luka Doncic and Austin Reeves haven't played a second yet. Just kind of a funny stat for the Lakers. I know this isn't a Lakers pod. The free throws let them down so much in the fourth quarter last night, 0-2. The turnovers throughout the game, throughout the series, have let them down so much. We can talk floor spacing and number two options and all of these different things, and it's all worthwhile. But in a game that if they had won that, this would feel complete. We wouldn't even be recording today. Like straight up, we were not going to record today if they won because they're not on the brink of elimination. In a game that they needed to win on the road and could have won on the road, I'm pretty confident that they missed 7 free throws in the fourth quarter, Omari. And it wasn't one guy. Stu went 1 of 2. Harris went 1 of 2 twice. Jenkins went 1 of 2. Cade went 1 of 2. I think Asar went 1 of 2. It's just Orlando seems to make the big shots and Detroit seems not to be able to make the big shots.
Yeah, I think that sums it up. Every time Orlando's needed a response, they've gotten it. You had Paolo hitting the big 3 to help them clinch it in game 3. You had Franz coming alive in game 1. And then you have Desmond Bane banking in that deep 3 in game 4. And what's also crazy is that the Pistons started off perfect from the line last night. They missed their first free throw in the third quarter, but they were still 4 for 5. And then they proceeded to miss 7 in the fourth quarter. So you go from making free throws all game to suddenly only shooting 50% in the final period, which just illustrates the lack of clutchness that this team has had. Orlando's been able to make those shots. The Pistons haven't. Another sports cliche is hit some Baker miss league. But yeah, part of the reason why the Pistons have kind of knocked on the door of these games and not actually walked through it is whether it's free throws or the 3-point shooting. I mean, how many open threes did they miss? They were 0 for 8 for 3. From 3 last night. They just can't generate a bucket, when you're missing free throws and wide open threes. I think those are really tough things to overcome.
Late in this game, I think whenever I started so 5 minutes, fourth quarter, Magic are up 2. Detroit had multiple opportunities. Cade misses a 3. They force a shot clock violation on the other end. LeVert gets called for an illegal screen. They get another stop on the crazy. Remember the crazy possession where it was like 7 blocks and 3 offensive rebounds? I didn't even know what to say about that possession, but they get a stop. Harris misses a 3-point attempt. Banchero went 0 for 2 from the free throw line. So we talk about like Orlando's free throw shooting, and then Cade missed a little runner before Wendell Carter Jr. got fouled 90 feet from the basket after that miss. And then he went to the line and the Magic went up 4. My whole point with all of this is they had their chances. And Wes makes a joke, but it's kind of true. Orlando seems to bank in a 3 when they really need one. It's either banked in or bounces 13 feet in the air and then goes in. And I'm not trying to take anything away from Orlando, but they seem to have made the big shots from multiple players. And Detroit has only seemed to be able to make big shots to get them back into the game, not to seal a game or really take a commanding. What's their biggest lead outside of game 2? It can't be more than a few points, is it?
They did go up 10 last night, but it wasn't for very long. But they started off with that 18 or 17-5 hole, and then they had the 35-3 run. So they went up 10.
I didn't realize they got it all the way to 10 last night. Okay.
But that was, but they couldn't maintain it. They did not have the lead going into halftime, I don't believe. And obviously they lost the game. So they had that momentum for 6-7 minutes. But once again, it's just not something that they could sustain.
All right, let's talk about individual play from last night. Or is that where you want to start? Like we could talk rotation decisions. I don't know that I have a whole lot of JB stuff, to be quite frank. I mean, the biggest rotation thing continues to be Ron Holland not playing. I mean, maybe there's an Isaiah Stewart needs more minutes, but I don't have any JB rotation stuff, at least right now. I actually thought the defensive rotations and too many helps actually got better. Last night, it wasn't good early in the game, but it got better throughout the game. There's actually one I highlighted that Cade did really good. Guys, a couple of Bane's 3s were truly just scrambled situations. I think one, Duren fell down again, but it was like a hustle play. Another one was off. I think it was an offensive rebound. So they did give up an offensive rebound, but I don't think they were just losing him the way that sometimes it happened. So I don't know that there's any of that as much as I do think we probably want to start with Cade Cunningham. who the turnovers are an issue right now, Omari. And we talked about it. I think you're seeing similar things as me. It's not just that the half court is jammed up. There were, again, careless, lackadaisical turnovers that we saw early in Cade's career that I think you would like to think that in his second playoff series would not be happening.
Yeah, there's been a little bit of or maybe more than a little bit, but a regression for him as far as him taking care of the ball, which is puzzling given that, this was his best season by far as a distributor. Averaged 10 assists, a career high, cut his turnovers below 4, which was not true of last season. And I believe the season before as well. He had really gotten his assist to turnover ratio in a pretty healthy place, especially considering his volume. And in the past, we've talked about on this pod a lot over the past few years, but yeah, he would have stretches where it's like the ball's going everywhere except where it needs to go, right? And you expect that from a young player who's learning the league and how teams are going to defend him. But for it to kind of rear its head again in this series is incredibly ill-timed on top of everything else that they've had to deal with. Like you said, just the lack of spacing and offensive help in general. And then you're giving away possessions on top of that. That's just tough to overcome. They had 20 turnovers in game 4. Cade had 8 of those. I believe he had 9 in game 3 and then 7 in game 2, which they won. But saw a stat from ESPN that he's the first player with 24 turnovers in a 3-game span. And they go 1-2 in that stretch. So the Pistons could do things to make it easier on him. And, I also think there are things Cade could do to make it a bit easier on him as well. And I think we do see the impact of the rotation where we've seen a little bit more Dennis Jenkins, I think, him just trying to get another ball handler out there to relieve some pressure off of Cade. But it's been a factor. It's been an issue. He probably could have cut the turnovers in half in both of those games if you just cut out the inexcusable or the sloppy ones.
Wes, I think, brings up a fair point. Looks almost like Cade has lost some trust in the guys around him, forcing a lot, ball sticks with him. This is one thing I pointed out, and I don't know if this is a Cade thing, if this is a JB thing, if it's I don't know. I don't know who to quote unquote place the blame on. In the non-Cade games at the end of the year, I made multiple references to, oh man, that ball movement was really good. Seems like there's really good flow here. The ball, and I don't know if it's just solely a Cade thing or if they thought maybe the best way to attack Orlando was somehow trying to attack certain matchups. Maybe Orlando's doing something, with how much they're willing to switch and how good they are defensively, at least in this series. I know that they weren't this team all year, but I do think that there is something to that where we just don't see these super fluid possessions. And even in that game, Omari, even the turnover started trying to force the ball to Jalen Duren. And again, I wanted exactly what JB called is what I wanted him to do. I think I said on the pod, run a block-to-block screen, throw the ball to JD in the post with his back to the basket and let him go score from there. But then they didn't make the post entry pass. And so it just seems like instead of things being organic, everything is being forced. Everything's having to be manufactured. Oh, Duncan Robinson hasn't get a shot. So now we have to run designed actions for him. And that's okay in general, but it almost seems like every possession almost has to be manufactured in some way, as opposed to just pushing pace and letting flow happen.
Yeah, there was never a point in the regular season where there was like this concerted effort to get JD the ball because
Agreed.
The ball found him naturally. So when you come out and the plan is very visibly, okay, they're trying to get JD involved early, but then, they can't even get the clean entry passes out. And Orlando's doing a lot just to kind of deny those passes anyway, as they've been doing. They're fronting them, they're getting bodies into them, all sorts of stuff. It like their offense just kind of fell apart a little bit early because, I think their first 3 turnovers all resulted from trying to get JD the ball. There were 2 bad entry passes, and then I think he had a push off and was called for an offensive foul. So you talk about them just not playing natural basketball. It just hasn't felt natural. It hasn't felt like a group with any cohesion on that end of the floor. And, I think everybody takes some responsibility, but, some of that too is Duren not capitalizing on the opportunities he's had. He's had one-on-one opportunities against Wendell, against Franz, against all those guys. And on paper, you wouldn't expect Franz to be the deterrent that he's been in the paint, but Duren just hasn't been able to establish himself. So I think trust kind of declines across the board, when one player's trying to get into a rhythm and nobody else can really pick up that slack. I think we saw a lot of that pretty early last night.
Yeah. I mean, Duren right now is 47% from the field. And so, I know it's only 8 attempts. Like, the attempts aren't enough either. And so I kind of understand why there is this like force to get him involved in the offense. But Return of the Bad Boys over on Twitter brings up the point, like, why don't they just let him set screens and crash the boards until he gets things going, right? Like, especially the way Orlando has seemed to really decided they're going to load up against him and really try to take him away. Maybe that's the best way to get him going, is just to, hey, go be a monster on the offensive boards, rim run. I still think that they can push more pace, Omari. I think that is one thing I would like to see here in game 5 and maybe a game 6, maybe a game 7. And my thing here is always, I didn't use the word transition for a reason, because oftentimes people hear this like, well, you have to get a stop to get out and transition. I'm not saying transition. I'm saying pace. Even we've seen teams do it to Detroit. When you push pace, even after a make, sometimes you get a cross match. Sometimes you get one guy that's a little bit lazy. Sometimes you get the defense broke down immediately and you get them in scramble. And so I would just like to see them always playing with a little bit more pace, because quite frankly, whether it's the Detroit offense or the Magic defense or a combination of both, we've seen that this team is going to struggle purely in the half court. So do something to give you a little bit more of an advantage and a little bit more flow.
Yeah, and that's the push-pull between them not quite being able to establish their game defensively, even though they held Orlando to, I think, 32.6% shooting, which is what you want. Defensively, they have not been able to just come up with enough steals and force enough turnovers to get their transition game going. So even if they're denying Orlando opportunities in the half court as well, you're kind of keeping them in it because you have 20 turnovers for 23 points, or you're losing the second chance point in offensive rebounding battle, just like trench stuff. And those are the areas that you thrived in during the regular season. So all the things that you could lean on to kind of lift up your half-court offense, which just hasn't really been their strength this season, hasn't been available to them. If you hold a team to 32.6%, you should probably win that game. And it felt like they just didn't, because they couldn't execute well enough on offense.
Return of the Bad Boys does bring up, for an assessment year, why isn't Ron playing? Also, why did they take Asar off Bane the last 2 games? I don't know that they did take Asar off Bane. Like, there may be switches and cross matches, but I still think that the basic matchups have stayed relatively the same throughout the series. I did the breakdown of Bane and how he got some. It may look like that because Bane has started to get it going a little bit. I think in game 3, it was game 3, it was over rotations and stuff like that in general. And Bane did read a couple really good screens in that one. Again, in game 4, I think some of Bane's stuff, not his first one, but some of Bane's stuff was just scrambled situations and he got clean looks. The commenter did ask about Ron Holland, though. I think that I understand why JB has decided not to play Ron Holland. There's part of me that says down 3-1, do you just say, forget it? Let's go. Let's do what we did in the regular season. Let's get him in there. Let's cause some havoc. Let's go crazy. I'm not upset at JB for the decision initially. I am a little disappointed that Ron Holland has yet again missed out an opportunity in the playoffs to just see what he can do and try to develop and learn from it. And I think in game 5, you lean back into it. Here's the thing, Omari. Javonte Green's 27% from 3 right now. And I've been screaming from the rooftops that Javonte Green should be a part of the postseason rotation, but he makes off-ball mistakes. He's missed some shots. I think you throw Ron Holland in the first quarter and see if he can get a steal and a transition and an offensive rebound and draw an illegal screen on an Orlando offense and just see if he can, cause some havoc for you. I would do that here in game 5.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I understood why he kind of fell out of the rotation. I think JB's been struggling to find lineups that can get it done on both ends. You get a couple defensive stops, but then you just can't buy a 3-pointer, or you keep turning it over, or, you've got your shooters out there, but, they're exploiting that Duncan matchup on defense. So I understand why. I think JB has some frustrations with Ron in the first couple games, and that's what led to that. But you're right. They're not shooting the ball well, regardless. They're not playing disciplined basketball, regardless. And if it really just needs to become slug fight down in the mud, we're dragging you down with me type of game, you probably need Ron to pull that off. He's a guy that sparks a lot of transition for you. Obviously, defensively, I think you could put him on Desmond Bane and feel pretty good about that. Maybe even Franz, who's questionable for game 5 with that calf strain. So we'll have to see if he's ready to go. But it can't get worse is the bottom line. And that Ron can give you something. So I think that's the argument for Ron.
If any of you are here with us, we try to get the comments turned on the back end. We may have that. So refresh the page, maybe try it out. And there we go. Yep. The comments are up on YouTube. So we got a little bit of time. We'll stay here a little bit.
5 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. We have 5 minutes. We'll hang with you guys a little bit. So throw questions in real quick here and we will touch on those things as we close things out. I thought Isaiah Stewart played well in this game. You had a crazy stat. Was that stat right? Is that how many blocks he had last night?
Yeah, he had 8 in 17 minutes, which is crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, that was...
And he came in immediately and he had 2 blocks. He had 3 blocks in his first 4 minutes of action. Franz drove against him one-on-one and he got rid of that. I think Jamal Cain had a tip-in try. He grabbed the offensive rebound. The Stu just came from behind and swatted him. Bane got inside for a layup attempt. Stu swatted that. Every time he was on the floor, it just felt like there was a lid on the rim for Orlando. And only played 17 minutes, but I felt like you could feel Stu every minute he was out there. I also want to mention he knocked down that 3-pointer in the second quarter, and they've packed the paint so much. It seems like they could lean into the pick and pop with Stu a little bit more. They're leaving him wide open, which, if he knocks down a couple threes, maybe you could grease the offense a little bit. It just seems like they could lean into him more than they have. You feel him as a rim protector. Theoretically, he's giving you a little bit of spacing. Even if it's a 2-big lineup with Duren, which I don't think we've seen at all this series. And if we have, it was only a little bit. But one way or another, he just seems like a guy who needs to get on the floor more. 10 guys saw the floor last night. And I think Stu was 7th in minutes, only ahead of Dennis and I want to say Kevin Huerter and maybe Javonte Green as well. It just seems like there's more for him to grow perhaps in this series.
All right, let's get to a few of these. Will Smith, we'll touch on the Cade conversation when the series is over, when the playoffs are over. Like I said, if you caught us at the top, we wanted to try to avoid Jalen Duren contract talks, Asar Thompson contract talks. What do the Pistons need to do in the offseason? So I do appreciate the question, and I do think it's one that probably needs to be talked about. And I definitely have a take on it, but I don't think that this is probably the episode for that. Michael says, any explanation for why Pistons are committing so many offensive fouls or just bad timing? I will say, my initial thought to this is a lot of times I give that credit to Orlando, to the defense. When Ron Holland is generating these same type of plays, I give Ron Holland the credit for that. I think one of the things with Orlando in this series is they weren't an incredible defensive team during the regular season. And I know Detroit has been bad offensively, but I do think some of that credit goes to Orlando. They were supposed to be a really good defensive team. That's what their identity is supposed to be built around. And so I will give them some credit for that. I don't know that you can say timing, because even though Cade missed time, it's still him and Jalen Duren in a lot of these, and they played a ton of minutes together in the regular season. So I don't know that I have anything from the Detroit side to quote unquote blame.
Yeah, we can move on to a couple questions here.
It said, I saw all the holes our team, but I can't understand how this team won 60 games. I'm not being sarcastic, for real. How? I think my thing, Omari, is I don't think we've seen the 60-win regular season team from Detroit. Or we always say the playoffs is different than the regular season. Maybe it's just that different from them, but it doesn't seem like the same team.
Yeah, I feel like that 60-win team has not shown up. This team hasn't been as disciplined, especially on defense. They haven't gotten the performances from the players they got during the regular season. Obviously, Orlando's done a pretty great job on Duren, not letting them get involved, not letting pick and roll with him and Cade get going. So, yeah, there's some of that for sure. But we haven't seen that 60-win team. It's tough to say what has to happen for that team to show up. But watching them win 60 games, I do believe that was a 60-win team. I wish I could tell you why that team has not shown up in the playoffs. I don't even think the Pistons can answer that right now. But the playoffs are a different game. And, Orlando maybe the best version of Orlando. It's just the type of team that, for whatever reason, has really gotten under this team's skin. It seemed like a favorable matchup for the Pistons going in, but it has not been that.
Okay, let's go through these quick. We'll get to as many as we can. Steven says the Magic were hunting Duncan on both offense and defense. The national broadcasters couldn't help but notice that. I will just quickly say, I don't think Duncan's been as big a problem or issue defensively as what I thought he would be. I also don't think he's been as positive offensively as what they need him to be.
Yeah, I think Duncan, the shooting has not been quite there for Duncan this series, and he's being asked to do a lot, really, as their only real spacer in that lineup, along with Tobias Harris. They are targeting him defensively, and, that's one reason why I'm curious if we end up seeing a bit more Karras LeVert next game. I thought Karras was really good last night. He played the most minutes he's played in the series, like 25 or 26. He can knock down threes, and he gives you a little bit more resistance defensively. So I am curious to see how they handle the Duncan role in Game 5.
Okay, so Colin says Cade looks exhausted. He's trying to do everything for us. Probably tough coming off the lung injury. Absolutely. It's crazy that he's playing 40 minutes. I wouldn't have guessed he was going to play 40 minutes tonight. Jacob, hey guys, haven't been able to make a live before. Thank you for joining. Sorry about the comments, but glad you were here and we were able to get this one. Appreciate y'all for what you do. Appreciate you and your support. As JB, at a certain point, you bench Duren and let Stu be Stu. It's hard watching Duren get bullied over and over. I would say I would not bench Jalen Duren. I think some people even commented on this on Twitter. Like, you have to take into account just what that would be in the lot. Like, whatever Jalen Duren is now, I don't know that you get a better version if you send him to the bench all of a sudden for Game 5. Now, can you shorten the rotations? Can you go to Stu earlier and more and those type of things? Absolutely. I would hear that out. I don't know that I would fully go into a start Isaiah Stewart.
Yeah, I don't know if he needs to start, but I like I said earlier, I think there's an argument for him playing more. Absolutely. He really brought it on the defensive end. I think the space he could give you at the 5 is worthwhile. And if you're going to not hit that many threes anyway, you might as well try to rebound a bit better and create more havoc on the defensive end. Yeah, maybe not bring Duren off the bench and start Stu, but I think you could play them together a bit more, and and maybe Stu just even eats into those minutes a bit more. He played 17, which left I think around 30, 31 for Duren. There's maybe a better ratio that can be found there, but I don't think he needs to do anything too dramatic.
Chili says, why doesn't JB go to the 2 big lineup? I do agree with this. I think this is the way to get Paul Reed in the game. We've been saying it from the start, before the series even started, though, that we thought Stu on Paolo was one of the better matchups. Maybe you give a little bit of reprieve to a Tobias Harris or whoever. I would not hate to see that. Michael says, I thought Karras was really good on defense with Stu. I think Karras has been fine in this series. I actually don't think he's forced offense, maybe as much as maybe what they've needed, to be quite frank, is maybe they need him to be a little more aggressive and just live with the result. But I think he's been good on defense. Richard says it's a young team and many of the guys are just folding to the mental stress. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot. And some of these guys, I think Wes brought this up, some of these guys, the first time in this role, even if they were a part of the series last year. I will also say Tobias Harris, and then I'll scroll through the comments a little bit more here, O2, and let you talk about it. The 3-point shooting has not been good from Tobias Harris at all. They've needed some of these makes that he has not been able to knock down. He's 3 of 21, but overall, Tobias Harris is the second leading scorer on this team at 19 points per game. He has come up massive in this series for them to keep some of these games even close.
Yeah, he's taken a lot of initiative on offense. They've run a lot through him, and I think he's stood up pretty well to it. So Tobias does deserve a shout. He's probably the only other guy on this team who has found a way to impact the game in some capacity. Offense will be off for a game so far.
No. So Chili, yes, only Danis hasn't played in the playoffs before this series. I agree, but Jalen Duren wasn't the number 2 option last year in the series. So it was just some of these guys in the role. The first thing people will bring up is Duncan Robinson got benched the last time he was in a playoff series with the Miami Heat, and I'm not saying Tobias isn't, playoff tested or hasn't played playoff games or whatever. Isaiah Stewart got hurt last year. So that's all I'm saying. I'm not giving them an out. I'm not making this an excuse. All I'm saying is that it's, even though they did get into the playoffs last year, not all of these guys were in these roles. Slim Whopper says, why does this team start so slow? Like it's playing from behind is where they find their energy. Yeah, they do seem to be able to always make up those deficits. I think that's a great thing to look for on Game 5. They got to get out to a faster start, O2. Whether it's It may not be shot making. It may be just being better defensively. If Orlando doesn't have Franz, that's a huge part of that. He's been very good on Cade, or at least making him work. I think he's been good offensively. So yeah, I think getting out to a good start would be huge for the Pistons. We're going to cut it off here, guys. We were hoping to go 30 minutes. I got a track meet for my kids. I got to get to O2's traveling and doing all of these things. No, Steven, you do not have to eat crow. You do not have to eat crow, because Danius Jenkins may not have been ready for this stage just yet, but he's still going to be a very good player in the NBA. We're both going to end up being right on that one. O2's got work to do, I'm sure, plus all the travel, all of that. So we're gonna stop here. Quite frankly, guys, I don't know what the schedule's going to be in terms of, listen, if they lose, we're probably going to wait. If they win, maybe we get one in before, like game 7 potentially. We'll just play it by ear a little bit. Make sure you check in. We'll tweet it out. We'll blue sky it out. We'll do all of those things. Thank you for joining us. Apologies again for the comments early. Hopefully we're able to answer some of those and get to those for you guys. Thank you to Wes. Thank you to Robin. I know we don't always give Robin a ton of shout outs, but during the middle of his workday, he got it going for us. So we appreciate him. O2, take it away, my guy.
As always, big thanks to our audio producer, Robin Chan, our editor-in-chief, Nicole Avery Nichols, and big shout out to Wes Davenport, as always. And we'll talk to you all soon.